Welcome back. China's recently proposed global data security initiative aims to change how data is exchanged and protected. After months of U.S. accusations of China over cyber crimes, is this a response to the U.S.'s Clean Network campaign? How would China's new initiative work? Joining me now to answer all these questions are David AUERBACH, writer and expert in technology, and Professor Zhang Fan of Beijing Normal University. Thank you both, gentlemen, for coming. Let me begin with you, Professor Zhang. This initiative proposed by China's Foreign Minister and State Councilor Wang Yi at the Global Digital Governance Conference is aimed at protecting global data security. Can you, first of all, explain to our viewers what this initiative of China entails? What is this all about?
Well, it's roughly sort of an idea being put out there, an initiative. It's sort of talking points being put out to start the discussions. It's not a fleshed out proposal for a final draft law for people to start considering. However, that's quite important already because there are 8 entries in the talking points, but they can roughly be categorized into 2 categories. So one is that you shouldn't weaponize information technology, which is quite important because that's actually a weapon of mass destruction. But people are really cavalier about that, attacking other people's infrastructure. On the other hand, data security, especially international data from other countries, right now the protection is sort of a rule of the Wild West. There's really isn't a clear set rule, and people are throwing around accusations left and right and just muddying the water. So that kind of discussion, laying out the rule, is quite important in my opinion.
Yeah, China's foreign minister stressed the importance that all parties should develop a set of international rules on data security that affect all countries, all parties involved through broad-based participation. How do you expect this initiative put forth by Beijing to protect privacy, data, and the interests of all countries?
Well, so in terms of all countries, so all the proposals talk about data in terms of sovereignty that's based on existing national sovereignty. So for example, when people want to have data from other countries, they go through the existing legal channels for requesting things almost identical to how you do other assets. So over the last 100 years or so, I think, the international law has at least in form been proposed to make sure that all the countries are treated equal. And this sort of bit by piggybacking on the existing infrastructure sovereignty, extending that into the cyberspace. So that's probably the easiest and most effective way to ensure equality between all different nations.
Let's put that in perspective. America's Clean Network campaign tries to keep Chinese hardware companies out of America's 5G networks. Its hardwares, softwares, and encourages a wider boycott of Chinese digital services and the removal of so-called untrusted Chinese apps from American app stores. David, do you think China's initiative recently on data protection is a direct response to America's Clean Network campaign?
Based on what Foreign Minister Wang said, it seems that it certainly was spurred by it, since he directly referred to what he called the U.S.'s groundless accusations in the name of clean networks. And so this is being positioned, at least politically, as a response, even if the text of the proposal doesn't explicitly mention the United States' actions that have to do relating to cases involving Huawei and now the banning of primarily, I think, TikTok and WeChat.
And of course, while the American and Chinese proposals cover slightly different ground, appealing to, but some say that they appeal to a common interest. That is, the creation of a safe global internet to ensure global economic growth. Do you see areas, space for China and the U.S. working together at this point to achieve these shared objectives?
I do. I think in some ways that work continues, often in the realm of the U.S.'s private businesses and outside of the realm of perhaps the direct announcements of the CCP. I think that so much depends on what is going to happen in the upcoming election, because in the United States, and whether it is Donald Trump or Joe Biden who becomes the next president, because uh, this the sweeping nature of the U.S.'s action seems to have been something that was a bit of a capricious and unanticipated move by the Trump administration. And there's not a lot of indications that the Biden administration would necessarily follow up on it. So what we may be seeing is a bit of advanced positioning in the case of Trump being reelected, but that there could very easily be a de-escalation and increased cooperation in the case that Joseph Biden is elected. The proposal, which I agree with the other guest, is definitely two-pronged. On the one hand, the respect for so-called cyber sovereignty for countries to run their internets however they wish, and on the other hand, the request for global open supply chain, which I think is in effect saying that apps should not be blocked in the way that WeChat and TikTok have been blocked. Those two prongs, I think, are China sort of wanting to reassert the status quo that existed between before the recent escalation, and which they hope to return to.
Well, Professor Zhang, in Beijing, the new initiative calls for countries to oppose surveillance against states and for technology companies not to have backdoors in their products that can be used to obtain information and private data. But the true test is really when the rubber hits the road, right? In implementation. How can countries, societies ensure that there can be sound implementation in this regard?
Right. So actually, because the Chinese companies have been subject to quite extreme scrutiny, and they have actually willingly subjected themselves to those scrutinies. For example, Huawei's hardware as well as its source code have been examined by various Western spy agencies. So this particular proposal is on the political front. Basically, on the technical front, there's no problem, and then on the political front, China essentially come out and say we're willing to do this law. It's essentially law type of treaty to ensure that your concerns is assuaged. And for a final fleshed out whatever treaty that happens in the end, you need to sort of have both elements in them. You need to have very practical technological guidelines on what should be done. And maybe you don't have to do it on an individual country basis, but some international body could do the examinations for everyone. And then also there's the legal promise that every mutual country make to each other and make to the international community.
Yeah, David, how do you look at China's plan to, number one, oppose surveillance against other states, and number two, against companies having their backdoors readily available by their security forces?
I think, as you say, it all boils down to where the rubber hits the road, in that all countries do continue to have some surveillance operations, and whether we're talking about the Five or Seven Eyes alliance between the U.S. and other Western countries, or surveillance mechanisms that are employed within states, that some backdoors are always being sought to be used by various entities for their own purposes. I think it's unlikely that, for example, China would permit uncrackable cryptography to be employed within its own borders, as they just, I believe, banned HTTPS traffic in the last couple months. So I think that what you're seeing is some desire to at least put some brakes on what is perceived as an escalation in cyber espionage and and surveillance, but it really does. Such things are never quite as clear cut as an initial statement like this might suggest.
Yeah, that leads to my next question. Actually, some commentators are saying that Beijing's initiative has a flavor of multilateralism. Lots of pledges out there protecting privacy, protecting data. Might this proposal soften relations between China and countries like the Five Eyes, which have been deteriorating?
In my opinion, it's because the Five Eyes, only to the extent that there would be a break between the United States and those other countries, as long as I think the remainder of the Five Eyes or Seven Eyes or however many eyes it may be, because they keep adding on them, as long as the United States maintains cordial relations, I think it'll be very, very difficult for any of those other countries to offer more than a fig leaf to China. And that is why, again, I tie it back to what happens in the election, that we can expect more animosity and saber rattling if Donald Trump is reelected, and I think almost no inroads against that the Western bloc of countries that has a cyber alliance if Donald Trump is reelected. If Joe Biden is elected, I expect that there will be some retreat to a position similar to that which existed prior to the Trump administration's escalations, and possibly softer than that. Whether that will amount to multilateralism is, I think, trickier because the United States still stands in opposition with regard to, shall we say, overall cyber surveillance. And I wouldn't expect to see, for example, any softening of something against Huawei, but we could see WeChat or TikTok again be permitted, and that sort of multilateralism exists in the sense of the open supply chain, which Foreign Minister Wang called for.
All right, many thanks to my guests for tonight, David AUERBACH, writer and expert in technology, and Professor Zhang Fan at Beijing Normal University. And that will do it for this edition of The Point. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. Download the CGTN app to watch our show, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thank you for watching. I'm Wang Yi in Beijing.